Hello everyone, and welcome to today's tutorial. This is going to be a tutorial over my newest song, Ethereal Spirit, and we're going to go about how I made this. I'm going to break it down for you and try to give you a little bit of in-depth insight into how I made this track here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with the piano. All right. So we're going to start here with this little piano, and this is basically what started the whole concept off for me. Was designing this little piece on right here, and as you can see, here's the bass line. That's the bass line right there, so it's in the key of G. I would say G minor, but I'm not really good on keys and scales. I just know the important part is it starts with a G, and that's kind of how it goes. So once I have this little concept figured out, then I'm going to go ahead and go to then I go ahead and start the arrangement. So we can go to the one of the meat of the project here, maybe like right here. Hey, what's up, Tarcisio? How you doing, man? Alright, so at this little part here, there's like a little flute part that goes off, but what we're really concerned about is how we did our chords and bass line, since that's really the biggest part of your project here is kind of having that figured out. And then obviously you're going to want your kicks and stuff too. So you see the chords aren't really doing the bass as much as the bass line is doing it itself. I know it's kind of like what, but some people think that you might have to do it all on the chords. And as you can see, the chords don't really have to follow as such strict rules when the bass note isn't involved. I don't know if that's like in the books anywhere, but is this an A sharp key? No, this is G minor. So the whole point is you want to make sure that you have a solid bass line and that it's a good repeat for you, I guess, like 8 bars. And how I done that was by doing my concept over here. So once I made the concept, then it was time to basically start in with, this was like the chords, basically, the chordal section of it. And then now I have a melody, which the melody here is going to be explained by the flute. So this was a rather interesting turnabout because, I just found this little flute VST basically through arcade, and just found it and started playing around with it. And then we started to work it into the track. So you can see here that even though I have all these the melody of the flute here, I take it into pieces. I take the melody into pieces here. So like the full entirety of the melody is probably here. Where is the So, that's just the melodic, like, top portion to go on top of it. But, you can really put anything you want. I just chose that flute, picked those little samples, and then we went from there. So the whole thing was sort of kind of drawn out with the piano, sketched out with the piano, and then we had the flute come in and become the melody. So then I started designing around it. So you already seen the chords, and then we can go to the ARP here. And basically the way I did that was, well, first I designed it. Just did a little random sound design with it, but it really isn't anything too complicated with the sound design. Only notable thing, I guess, is that I have a little bit of cutoff applied to it, and it's 4 voices and 3 voices here. It's a sine and a saw, and basically, yeah, these parameters are just randomly set by my ear based upon what I was trying to do. Then we have a little bit of phaser and delay going on here. And I'm a big fan of both of those, but really a big fan of delay in general for ARPs. This is a great way to add a little bit of space to the track, space with the ARPs. So don't neglect the delay portion too much. Just don't overpower it. That's kind of my suggestion. And then once we did, you notice we linked it to the mixer track here, and we started EQing out, cutting out some of the low bass, sub, low, mid information that we don't want in it. We also did this for our piano and our flute. You can see the EQ curves here, and this is all just based upon what I was hearing and based upon when the mix was playing. So that's just the way you got to remember when you're mixing, when you're looking at these tracks and you're listening to other people or watching other people produce or anything like that. Just know that the mixing is based entirely upon their perspective and what they hear. So you should hear this and think you'd mix it differently, basically. Eventually, I know at first you don't know what's going on, but you know when you sit down here and when you're going to be in the driver's seat, so to speak, it'll be your decisions that matter the most. So just keep that in mind. It's not really up to anybody else's discretion but your own. But you know you do have to keep a little bit of balance there as well. So yeah, there's the flute EQ, and then we have a little bit of stereo to it, and then this send right here is just simply a volume automation. And what that does is just makes it so that I can control the volume going up and down, and I don't have to link an automation to this mixer fader right here because I don't like doing that too often. We can move to the pads here. So a lot of like mixing work went into it, but basically the whole idea was to make it sound very bright and ethereal and floaty. And so it's routed to my verb here a lot, and then we got a bunch of EQ and filtering going on here with some sidechain. Of course, everything really here is sidechain. Yeah, at this point, it's pretty much I don't even really have to mention it because it's pretty much standard. I actually will say if I don't have it more than if I do. But yeah, that the pad goes in here like that, and basically the way I have it following is it's still following the bass notes, just a higher register, so it's in the C5 to C7 octave range. And I have like a couple of extra notes on top here, basically like the fifths of it or the sevenths of it, just chilling on top. This is just an octave, but it is a fifth right here. So you can see that it's not really like a whole bunch of chordal information inside of the pad. I'm simply highlighting the notes that I want to be accentuated by the pad. So that's kind of a way you can look at it as well, is using your pad to accentuate your chords and your bass and your melodies rather than just it being a representation of the chords themselves. Hope that makes sense. Here's some melody bits here. So you can see here the sidechain is turned off for this. And that's because I didn't want it to be cut or pumped so hard by the sidechain whenever it does come into the mix. So that's also, a creative decision I made there as well, where, typically you would sidechain these things, but I decided not to because I felt like it should be heard more clearly. So there are certain elements in your mix you could decide not to sidechain rather than having everything sidechained to the kick. So the melodies typically can have a little bit of, they'll be lacking some of the sidechain, because I do that. I want them not to be pumping with the mix so hard, so to speak. It's like a push and pull. Just kind of consider it that way. So that's just what the sound was. This is just Spire, and I picked up Crystal. This is from like the factory set, and usually from there I do little edits and stuff here, and although the knobs are great to work with, this is a pretty cool little plugin as well. Very fun. I do mean to do more work with this and get to learn this more in depth, but in any way, we use Spire to make the melody, and we use it to make the like the second half of the melody basically. And with that, just keep it in mind, you see that these two melody lines, they're kind of made to, like complement each other in a way. Like they're not meant to like stack so hard. One's kind of have a different kind of a character to it that lets you know that it's a little bit different. And this is more realized in the mix than soloed out. But you get the idea nonetheless that when you do add, adding little bits of things to embellish your melody, you don't want to add almost the same kind of timbre of sound. Find maybe uh, different, maybe a little bit lower or a little bit, different kind of timbres that you could work with. We'll go to the bass line here. So, I mean, there's nothing too complicated about the bass line other than that. I do like to mess around with it in Harmless. I find Harmless one of my favorite places to make basses. So the parameters I use are sort of uh, unique to Harmless, which is really like messing with these subharmonic 1, 3, and 4. Very interesting character results if you start playing with that. And I also do like to throw a little bit of pan, pitch, and phase in unison, even though it's a bass line. I still like the way they sound. It almost makes them all Reese, like plucky and Reese at the same time, but it's just a personal preference. I like the more bowed kind of sound it makes, and that's just my stylistic choice. But you have it linked over to your EQ. It has some side chain. We got an EQ. We're dipping a little bit in the mids. We're running it through a couple of compression stages, basically. Then we have some more EQ here, and all right, and then basically the compression is just to keep things in line a little bit more simpler. So it's sort of hard to explain, but you can see how the tops and the bottoms here a little bit. There's a lot of space, and I do a little compression here, and you can look over here, and you can almost see that these are a little bit more smoother in the way they're coming out, and they're also a little bit more closer in distance and volume. So basically, it's just compression, and I'm compressing the upper end of it, like the higher portions of it, to make it all a little bit more even and smooth. People could do this extremely. People do this lightly. So these settings are based completely upon my ear and what it was sounding like in the mix when I was creating it at the time. So they could be wrong, right, great, wrong. But basically you can look and you can see the information, see what is being compressed right here, and this is kind of help you show your final result. The second baseline here, this one is just basically a copy of the first baseline, but I make a more sustained version. Oh, sorry. But basically, this base is just basically just a real simple little. It's a duplicate of the one above it, and I like using a duplicate because it just gives me more finer control over the things like the automating it, bringing it in. You can do kind of like stylistic things where you could fade it out as it comes into the mix and or leaves the mix, or as it changes from one section to the next. So I really like to have its own copy just because I like to have a little bit more finite control just by habit. And then we can come down here to the drums. And so you see like there's a loop involved and then there's something without it here. So the loop kind of thickens up the drum beat a little bit, drum loop. I do little things to the loops. I'll change the pitch to them. I'll stretch them a little differently. I'll even chop things, like I'll chop like a little snare out of them. Sometimes I'll run them into Slice X. So there's a lot of ways you can approach using loops, but I do think loops are worth using, worth chopping up, worth restructuring, however you want, creative you want to approach them. I'm pretty much, I don't really mind, I guess, the drums. Like, as long as they're good and they ride, then I can create the tune. Then I can get a little bit more in depth. So, the whole process of these, it's just basically what I feel. The kick here, I use just one. One with some EQ. I boosted up the sub bass frequency area. And then this right here is just a low pass filter, I guess. And it just kind of fades it in and high passes it down. And this is the EQ. I actually probably could use a little bit more. I have a volume send. And I have, looks like some compression here. Okay, there we go. I have a little bit of compression going on. And then, of course, it's just mixed to my taste. Same thing with the snare. I drew it in there. I pitched it down just a little bit here, so that way it was a little bit more thicker in the mix. It's just like things like this are personal, but messing with your pitch knob, messing with your in and out fader, checking out these pre-computed effects over here, and try playing around with these. This is a little bit recent, so if you're using a newer version of FL, you might not have noticed, but this exists in the sampler. And this is a great way for you to edit your drum samples or any kind of sample that you're messing with. I would highly suggest you kind of look into working around with these. You might be able to make some creative effects happen from just using the sampler by itself without any external processing. That makes sense. But yeah, this is this little clap I use. And then we have a little like other stereo snare, a little stereo snare to kind of end it all off, you know. And I see I have it going every 4 bars, the stereo snare, so it's not repeating. And then we have it dropping at the section. So if you kind of look at the arrangement between 2 and 3, which is a 16-bar phrase here, you can see how the drums stop at the end of these like 8 bars, or they have some kind of variation that happens. It doesn't have to be the same variation, but you should do something. Or decide yourself to keep it going. Even that is good than that, if that makes sense. So at the end of your 8s, especially when it comes to your drums, try to make sure you're adding some kind of, suggestive end or change, or maybe like a flourish. I would suggest definitely add like little flourishes at the end of your 16s, at the 8 little mini flourishes. But don't just beat it all the way through, if that makes sense. Even these little spaces, they just make a world of difference. Trust me. Okay, now we have the hats. So this is lightly EQ'd, but really it's just like panning, putting them in volume control. So I do a lot of volume editing here on drum. So you hit this little graph editor. And you can look and you can see each of these has individual kind of volumes going on here. So they're not just all the same static volume going across. Rather, what you're doing is you're adding a little bit of like humanization variation to the drum elements. And this makes the instrument sound, the drum loop itself sound much, much more interesting. The little bit of drops in volume in between them can mean the world for making that drum loop sound so much better. We got little rides here to complement the end of the track, end of the 8. So, or end of the 4s actually. So, 1, 2, 3, 4. Little rides complement each of the 4s here. So you see, like, my reasoning is still the same. At the end of my little phrases, I have little like flourishes, or uh uh like little tiny breaks, if that, I hope that makes sense. Have little breaks in between, and I even like cut the loops at little spots too. This is all intended. This isn't just for no reason, but like if you cut them early and you know you're going to cut your loop pretty much every time, do it beforehand, copy it across, and it makes it easier to deal with. But however you decide to go at it, just make sure you're trying to add a little bit of flavor. It doesn't have to be complicated, because I'm not like a complicated person. But add a little bit of flavor, distinction, a little bit of signature, whatever you like to hear in the track to it. And then we'll go to the effects here. So your standard kind of white noise / crash effects. Biggest deal here is just make sure you EQ them in, control the volume best you can. I even like to automate the volume externally, within the project itself. That way you can kind of coast them down when the bridge hits. And basically that's really it for the whole like layout of the song. I actually didn't do any mastering on this one, I don't think. Not on this project. I think I did another project, and I don't think I have it. I'm not sure. But regardless, the mastering stage, it's all kind of irrelevant, because the mixing is the most important part. So you want to make sure that you work on your mixing if you want it to be like spectacular sounding. But if you want it to be a good song, it needs to be arranged properly. Okay. And so it's more important that you kind of focus on a good arrangement, I believe, than, like the best mix. Because mixing is something that's it's pretty static, I guess. Like it's a little bit more black or white when it comes to mixing. Like either it's too muddy, too this, too that. Other people can give you good input to. There's people that are very good at what they do, and they've been mixing music for a while. But the thing that they can't tell you is they can't tell you how to make your song. Nobody can. So that's why it's a big deal that you learn and you figure out how to arrange your song. And once you know how to arrange it, mixing it, and all that extra glamour and gliss, it's gonna come with time. These aren't, like these decisions and these motions I made, they weren't made just me learning them on the spot. A lot of these were made from me doing these over time and then applying them to practice when I produce. So that's sort of the way I would like you to look at when you produce it. Don't put so much weight against how it is released or it getting a lot, but simply work on the fundamentals of things that you can improve. Work on really refining things like your melodic interpretations of tracks. Like I said, you can keep it simple. The whole project started from this. So you can see that it wasn't like I did a whole bunch of complicated things. I took one element and started to build more and more upon it. And when I did that allowed me to create the arrangement. So just because, like these chords or like standard chords or anything, the chords you'd hear anywhere, the way that they're arranged in this track is what makes them unique for this track, or makes them unique, period. Because, the way that I arranged them, but, the chordal selection and the things that you decide to use, that's not really, you know, that's not going to change really as much from track to track. You really don't have a choice but to use a C major or a A minor or whatever. It's the way you decide to apply it into your track. And into your arrangement is what makes it more stylistically definitive of what you're trying to do or what you're showing. So I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense. And if you have any questions, just let me know, guys. Shout out to Alex Stokes for liking the stream. I appreciate it on Facebook. I hope you're doing great there, man. If you have any questions or any kind of comments or anything about this track at all, or about this arrangement, or you want me to tell you anything else about it, just drop me a comment below. Let me know what is on your mind. Timestamp a part in this video that was maybe confusing to you or didn't make much sense, or you need more detail on, so that way I can go ahead and explain this more in depth further. Okay. Much love, everybody. I really appreciate you tuning in to this video, and I will catch you all on the next one. Bye, everybody.